Hello once again, watchers of good TV. My name is Nick Pell, and this is my review of The End of the Fucking World Season 2. Now, this is the second season of The End of the Fucking World. This is a continuation of the first season of the self-titled show, which focused on two main characters, Alyssa and James, who both, one is a sociopath, essentially, that is James's character, and another girl has trouble dealing with kind of emotions and stuff like that. She doesn't really feel them, from what I remember from the first season. And these two people, they find each other. James, wanted to kill an actual person for the first time instead of just animals, decides he's going to make Alyssa his target. They end up bonding over the course of an 8-episode, I believe, adventure. And the first season ends with basically a cut to black gunshot with James running across the beach. And you don't know if he survived, if he got killed. To my knowledge, the source material that the first season was based on did have him die, and that was all that there was really of the story. There's a little epilogue bit, but it doesn't really do a lot past that point. So a lot of the second season is very fresh material, and I will be talking about the majority of the season in this review. So if you have not watched the second season yet, probably stop watching and come back once you're done with it, because there will be spoilers. Quickie review though, in case you just want to kind of know if it's worth your time or not, I would say it is. If you saw the first season and you really liked it as much as I did, check this out, because I think it works as a good second half or part two to that first season, and it ties up the story and ends in a very satisfying way, I think. Now, the biggest reveal done in the end of the second episode is that James did survive the gunshot. He did get shot at the end of the first season, but he recovered over the course of, like, basically 2 years, I guess, in a hospital. Him and Alyssa basically haven't seen each other for that duration of time. And during the first episodes, it basically takes its time basically setting up these characters, basically showing us where they have been over the course of these 2 years, along with a new character, Bonnie. And it's shown very early on that she had a connection to the philosophy professor who James ended up killing in the 4th episode of the first season. And that's kind of the big centerpiece of the show in general, honestly. It's that event which is kind of the big highlight of the show itself, and what everything around it is centered around. And she seemed to have seen him as basically this first person who really saw her as beautiful, basically just saw her as a person, seemed to love her, and then when she goes into jail for killing somebody, she learns that he got murdered by James, and then shortly after that, when she gets out, she tries to track down Alyssa and James and basically try to kill them as revenge for killing this professor. Alyssa ended up basically just kind of not really knowing how to process everything that she dealt with, and with James kind of being forced to write a letter saying that he had no more interest in her and kind of blamed her for having to murder the professor. She just got very empty inside, and to try to fill that void and create something of an emotional response, she decides, oh hey, I'll marry my boyfriend, because that makes sense. And then, like I said, James survived the gunshot, and so he has been spending the majority of the 2 years recovering in a hospital, learning how to walk again, and then his father tragically passes away very shortly before his main introduction into the season. So for the majority of the show, he is carrying around his father's ashes as well, trying to find a good way to let them go. Jessica Barden and Alex Lawther, I think they are still the high points of this series. Jessica Barden in particular, just because of how much emotion she shows by not showing emotion, if that makes sense, because you can tell this character has been affected by what she went through in the first season more than any other character, at least more than James, it would seem. Because you can tell those events of that 4th episode where the professor essentially tries to rape her, those do haunt her, and you see them during like quick flashback moments which are seemingly in her mind as she's just going throughout her life. It's something which still haunts her, and it's a very big focal point of the season with her character arc and what she is basically struggling to deal with as she's eventually reunited with James. Alex Lawther, I think his character, James, has gone through the biggest change in personality since at least the beginning of the show up to this point, because it's been a while since I saw the first season, I'll be honest with that. And there's a very quick recap at the very beginning of this season, which kind of reminds you of the very big events which you kind of need to remember. But he's gone from basically sociopath to not sociopath anymore. He's got emotions, and he seems pretty much like a normal person, just with kind of more being a more passive personality, and just still being kind of shy and quiet and everything. The biggest thing that I do like about this season is mental illness, because all three of our main characters are struggling with that to some extent, I would say. Alyssa is probably the most obvious one of it, because you can see her dealing with depression, with PTSD, to a variety of different things, to even thinking about like killing herself. You can just tell that these are all things which are going on throughout her mind. She's trying to just process day-to-day life, and just trying to find something to fill the void which is just broken in her. And while I myself have not personally had to deal with those things, thankfully, I do think that's represented really well in this show in a really realistic way for someone who would have gone through those events or something similar to that. Bonnie's character, though, is probably my biggest issue with the show, despite it's like, it is also kind of predictable with the first like 4 episodes or the first half of the season, because it does kind of follow plot point by plot point in a different fashion what the first season did, where Alyssa and James, they end up going on a road trip, and they pick up a hitchhiker, and they end up staying at this place for the night, which ends up in the death of someone, in this case the motel keeper, via Bonnie. The second half does different things, but the first half just seemed very by the books, and I was afraid that I was going to be doing a lot of the same stuff. But Bonnie's character kind of stays one note for the majority of this whole season, I thought, just because we're introduced to her. She has an interesting enough backstory. We get to see where she's coming from, and we see her connection to the professor, which establishes her motive for revenge. But she doesn't really grow or do a lot that's different over the course of the season. She travels with Alyssa and James for the majority of the show. You can see kind of the uncertainty and her not really being sure how to cope with or process with the loss that she is dealing with. But you never really see her evolve or grow that much until like the end of the penultimate episode, where she almost commits suicide and Alyssa and James stop her, and she just breaks down before she gets presumably arrested. And so I personally would just like to see a little bit more just change to her, or I would have thought it would have been a little more interesting if she had just been kind of just a regular hitchhiker, and then you just realize that there's something off about her, and then when James finds the book that has the professor's picture on it and realizes that there's a connection, then we see her flashback episode in the next episode, and then it cuts to the 7th episode and goes from there. I thought that would have been a lot more of an interesting, like, OMG reveal type of thing. I thought that would have been cool. Instead of just outright knowing where she's coming from and not having really any air of mystery to her, and having her just be kind of one note. I did like the ending to the show, as well as kind of I said at the beginning of this review as well. I did think that the end of the 7th episode, just leaving it where that episode ends, would have been a very interesting spot to end it. But we also just ended up getting closure for Alyssa as well as James, but more so Alyssa, in that final episode, because she returns to the professor's house where just this whole thing which is haunting her ended up happening, and she does seem to get some sort of closure, and then they end up together at the very end of the episode, confess their love for each other, and it just kind of ends right there. It doesn't really seem to need a 3rd season, I don't think, at least. I don't really know what they would do. There's not really a big cliffhanger moment at all anywhere in this final scene, so I don't really think that there's any need for it. I feel like they almost did this season just because of how popular the show ended up being and how much demand there was to find out what ended up happening to James's character, and just trying to tell more of this story. But it doesn't really seem like there's a lot more story to tell unless they just do the same thing where they get together and then they go on a road trip and more murder happens. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy The End of the Fucking World Season 2. It's been so long since I saw the first season, so I can't really compare them that well. But I do remember, I think, that like midway through the first season, it did kind of start to drag, or the pacing kind of slowed down a little bit. It does that a little bit in this one as well, but I didn't think it was as extensive, in my opinion. Just I watched like the whole thing in one sitting too. So I watched episode 1 to episode 8 in just one 2.5 or 3 hour period, and it does slow down here and there, but it wasn't as immense as I remember it being for the first season. So take that as you will. But I enjoyed it. If you have seen it, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments down below. Did you like it as much as I did? Did you hate it more than I did? Do you think it deserves a 3rd season? Do you want a 3rd season? What would they do for a 3rd season if it ends up being made? Let me know your thoughts on that as well. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe once again if you so choose. I appreciate it immensely. And as always, my people, my name is Nick Pell. And once again, keep on watching.